afterwards.
Thank you, Miriam. I'm so deeply honored to be part of this experiment. I think it's a wonderful idea. I think I'm a little nervous being the very first one because we don't know what it's like, and either this is going to be a fantastic success, or you may say after today, oh no, we have to go in a completely different direction. But I hope it will be satisfying. And I thought about the title of your series, From the Researcher's Diary. And I decided, at least by way of introduction, to take that seriously and think about how it is I came to be working on the Kennicott Bible. Now, it's true, as Miriam said, that it is part of a larger shift in my scholarship from working exclusively on Christian medieval material to Jewish material. But why the Kennicott Bible? Well, anyone who's seen it knows that it is truly among the most spectacular works. Before I originally encountered it at the exhibition that was held in New York in 2013, Crossing Borders, where it had pride of place in the exhibition, although curiously, it doesn't get discussed at all in the book of accompanying essays. And I was familiar with the facsimile. So I decided to spend more time with Kennicott. And fortunately, here at the University of Toronto, we have a copy of the great 1985 facsimile. And whenever you see a picture in the next hour with my fingers on it, please be assured that that is not the actual Kennicott Bible, but the facsimile here in Toronto. Now, it's of course not the original, but it does have the advantage of being easier to handle and gives one a sense of the experience of interacting with the book. Now, the thing, as researchers, we know how this works. Things bother us, right? We see something and we say, why? Right? So in my case, it had to do with two of the pictures in the back that have this inverted battle of the rabbits and the dogs, the cats and the mice. And okay, it's a nice general theme of inversion that we find in various manifestations in the Middle Ages. But why in the Kennicott Bible? And why specifically here in the text pages around the grammatical treatise Sefer Michlol by Rabbi David Kimchi, the Radak? What's going on? This has been bothering me for 10 years. I was also curious about the fact that the Sefer Michlol appears at the beginning of the book, before the Tanakh starts, and at the very end. I thought this structure was unusual, and I was curious about that. So many years later, 2019, I had the opportunity to spend some time in Oxford, and thanks to the very generous curator of manuscript, Cesar, I was able to examine the Kennicott Bible directly. And I thought I'll finally start to get some answers to my questions. Now, I don't presume that most of you are familiar with the Kennicott Bible, and even this snapshot is not enough to communicate how spectacular the manuscript is, but I do hope that it begins to give you some sense of the whole thing. It was written as the colophon by the Sofer and the Masoret Moshe ibn Zabara tells us. It was completed in La Coruña in 1476 for a certain Isaac, son of the honorable and esteemed Don Solomon of Braga. And you can begin to see some of the exquisite visual material packed into its 448 foliated. There are actually more folios. We'll get to that. Okay. Now, one thing that I want you to keep in mind before we jump to the heart of the presentation is that this is one of those wonderfully rare instances in certainly medieval art history where we have the critical model. We know that the makers of the Kennicott Bible, Moshe ibn Zabara, the scribe, and Yosef ibn Chaim, the artist, had an earlier Bible, we call it the Cerbera Bible, made around 1300 in Catalonia, but clearly made in 1300 and in Catalonia by the 14th century. We know that it was in La Coruña for Moshe and Chaim to use. Now, I'm not going to introduce it at each and every step of my presentation, but I simply want to let you know that methodologically, whenever I'm talking about the Kennicott Bible, I'm always aware of what is happening in the Cerbera Bible model. I will have occasion to make particular points about it, but I didn't want you to think that I am ignoring the model. Okay, so here is another example of how we see the Kennicott Bible modeling itself closely. It's not a one-to-one copy, but clearly taking some of its visual vocabulary from the earlier model. Okay, the book has 459 folios to be exact. The parchment is very fine. It's a full Tanakh with vocalization, cantillation, Masora Magna, Masora Parva, decorative pages, micrography. Clearly, it was a deluxe trophy book, a status symbol, to be sure, but no less a book with meaning in multiple ways, and I'm hoping to share some of those meanings with you today. I also need to say, by way of one last introductory comment, that you know that there are many esteemed scholars who work in this field. I'll just rattle off a list of names: Katrin Kojman Appel, Sarit Shalev Aini, Sarah Offenberg, Dahlia Ruth Halpern, Julie Harris, Mark Epstein, Eber Froimovich. They've all done so much to show the deep ranges of meanings that can be found in these medieval Hebrew manuscripts. And what I'm offering here today is one more example to add as we collectively write the full history of the Hebrew illuminated book. Okay. But I should take that opportunity. I'm really curious to know. I have to take a quick look. Oh, okay. Good thing I named Eber Froimovich. I see she's here. But I was hoping Dahlia Ruth Halpern would be here. She's not. Okay. Oh,
Sarit will come later. She cannot come at the beginning, but she'll join us later.
Oh,
Sarit.
okay. Well, I'll put her on the spotlight. Somebody let me know when Dahlia Ruth gets here, because I need to ask her a question.
No, Dahlia, I don't know, but Sarit will come later.
Sorry, yes. Okay. Right. So here we go. Now, I'm about to step into dangerous waters. When I started to work on Kennicott, of course, my first order of business was to read the facsimile commentary volume by Bezalel Narkis and Eliza Cohen-Mushlin. And they did phenomenal work. They looked at the manuscript very carefully, of course. And they pointed out that there seems to be a problem in the second to last quire of the book, specifically that the text ends on 444 recto. Then there are three blanks actually, but that very last blank on 445 verso is imprinted with evidence that it had been pressed up against the inner upper cover, right? So that they imagine flipping around that final bifolium, right? And here, I just want you to see, to make the mystery of the blank quire deeper, there is an impression on folio 445V, which reveals an upside down imprint of the decorative cutwork doublure rectangle from the inner upper cover of the box binding. And now that's a little hard to see, so I've excerpted the key text, which I've highlighted in red. The strange position can only be explained if we assume either that the quires of the manuscript became unstitched at some point and were kept loose in the box, while in the hands of an owner who reversed the entire manuscript, blah, 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 blah. One is forced to assume that it was done by a Christian owner who was not necessarily interested in the Hebrew text of the Bible, right? And why did he do this? So that the end of Sefer Michlol in its beautifully decorated arcades could be next to part one of Sefer Michlol at the beginning of the book, right? So that all of the non-biblical material that looks the same rather than being separate would be united at the front of the book. And then it would look like a luxurious Christian gospel book with its canon tables. Well, when I read this, I thought, wow, that's fantastic. This is the kind of stuff that we love, right? We've got Christians manipulating Hebrew books and appreciating them aesthetically. Why isn't there more? Why isn't this part of our broader conversation about polemics between Jews and Christians in the Middle Ages? So when I had the opportunity to look at the Sefer Michlol itself, I thought, I got to check this out for the Kennicott Bible said, I've got to check this out myself. I mean, the truth is, even before I saw the manuscript, although I thought it was a very seductive proposition, I was a little skeptical because as the choir, and I know some of you are modernists and you're not so accustomed to looking at manuscript choir diagrams, but I hope this is sufficiently clear to communicate the point, right? If Cohen, Mushlin, and Narkis are right, and they recognized it themselves, what it would have meant is that there would have been Sefer Michlol, right? But the end of Nehemiah would have been here in the middle, and then there would have been an upside down page of the Nehemiah text. And it seemed to me that even a Christian Hebraist or a pure aesthete would be troubled by the visual incongruence of having a text page where it didn't belong here in 437, or an upside down text page, right? Even if they don't read Hebrew, you're going to see that it's not right. So I was already a little skeptical. And then I went and I looked at the key page in question, 445 verso. Now, I'm trying to give you the biggest magnification on the Bodleian website. Even that doesn't communicate what it needs to. But basically, if you're saying to yourself, I don't see any evidence that the inside cover of that's the back. I should be showing you the inside. That's just a mistake. I apologize. Oh no. The inside cover should be leaving an impression on this folio. It's just, I didn't see it. Linda Safran, who looked at the manuscript with me, didn't see it. Cesar, the keeper of manuscripts, didn't see it. We just didn't see the evidence. But in fact, if you do look at the back paste down and the few folios preceding it that have indeed been pressed against that back design, which is cut out in vellum, as you'll see in a moment, these preceding folios do have an imprint from the paste down. So they're right in principle, but there's no evidence. And not only is, so you could say to yourself, well, it faded, but Narkis and Cohen Mushlan gave precise measurements to prove that it was removed from the back, turned around and pressed against this front paste down. But I hope my diagram convinces you that I did very meticulous measurements, and they simply cannot have been right, because where they saw the press down that is in the different layers does not correspond to the actual book box and the paste down. And here you can get a sense. I think you can see, especially if I make it a little bigger, you can see all of the gold straps. And here, some of them have lifted up off of the first vellum paste down, right? So here's the board, one paste down of vellum, then a second layer of vellum on top. But all of this, where the black goes into the gold, there's no border at all. It's painted, but it's all the same layer. It's here and here that you get the actual cutout. So just forensically, the impression would not have been made where they said it was. So that was a long time, but I really, I tread very carefully in saying that Bezalel Narkis and Eliza Cohen Mushlan were wrong. I feel like if one's going to do that, one has to really know what they're talking about. And I hope I've given you enough evidence to give you confidence that what I'm saying is right. And it's not just about the measurements, right? Really, what's at stake here is a potential bombshell of an example of Christians manipulating the Kennicott Bible. But I think that we can dispense with that hypothesis. But what can we learn from looking at the Codicology and the decoration of the Kennicott Bible? Now, we know from the colophon itself, written by the scribe, and I'm giving it to you here. I hope, even if the Hebrew is not clear, sufficiently clear that you can check my translation, but I've highlighted in red the statement by Moshe ibn Zabara that he was consciously aware of the codicological structure of his book, right? He says explicitly, I fabricated it in 37 choirs, right? So it's something that he's thinking about. It's important for him to call attention to. So if it's good enough for him, then I think it warrants us paying attention to the codicological structure, right? And we have some evidence of how the book was practically put together. At the end of each choir, there's a catch letter that works its way through the book. So here it's the end of the first numbered choir. It's not actually the first choir in the book, as I'll underscore in a moment. I should take the opportunity very quickly just to note that for the most part, the subject that interests a lot of scholars about these medieval Bibles is the uniquely Jewish contribution to the phenomenon of medieval decoration, and that is the micrography, the decorative and often figurative shapes that the Masora Magna is twisted, it is shaped into. On the whole, the makers of the Kennicott Bible were not focused so much on decorating and playing with the Masora. There are exceptions, but in a book of 450 folios, it's the exception rather than the rule. And scholars like Dahlia Ruth Halpern and Michel Ducamp have demonstrated to us very clearly how in many of these Iberian Bibles, the makers were exquisitely sensitive to what happens when you change from one choir to the other, and they worked very diligently to make decorative Masora across two facing choirs so that when the book was put together, they would match and provide a harmonious visual experience to the reader. It also helps the binder put things together. Okay, but that is not something we see in Kennicott. Now, I think my notes from my visit to Oxford will underscore that old maxim, those who can't teach. Right? This is why I didn't become an artist, but rather an art historian. But these are notes from the field about how I looked carefully at every folio of the book because I wanted to understand the guts, the interior structure of the manuscript, right? And it's just a matter of methodological principle that one can think about the iconography of cats and mice in Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, Toronto, New York, Berlin, wherever, right? But the one thing you can't do is look at the binding structure, and you look at how the folios interact with one another and the choices that were made. So I spent a lot of time doing that. And what results is a list of choirs, which we can match up with the contents of the book, and we can begin to see patterns, and we can also begin to see particularities, right? And so, for instance, most obviously, if you run down the list, you'll see that on the whole, the makers of the Kennicott Bible preferred regular gatherings of 12 bifolia. But when we see a choir that's not 12, then it jumps out and asks for our attention. So the first example is right there in the initial choir, which has 8 bifolia and contains the Sefer Michlol, and I think most remarkably, does not have the Hebrew letter, the catch letter, right? So when Moshe ibn Zabara started to count his choirs, he said, I had 36 choirs. He started counting from the second choir, which means that in his mind, the first one was not part of that formal count. And just to jump ahead, right, you've already guessed that he stopped counting. He also didn't count the second choir at the end with the second part of the Sefer Michlol. So that's something that we'll have to keep in mind. Now, the second exception comes here in choirs 10 and 11, in which the gatherings are of 10, right? So what is happening here in choir 10, and actually more important, choir 11? This is exactly the place where we've got the greatest concentration of visual material in the book, excepting the Sefer Michlol at the beginning of the end. Now, before, I'm going to tease you just one more second before I show you the actual art that you've come to see today. For the next half hour, I'm going to make certain general comments about Iberian Hebrew Bibles. Now, I can't pretend to have seen, identified, and considered every one, but I have reviewed the information available from scholarly catalogs, literature, museum publications, published catalogs, online library collections. I'm basing any general comments I make are based on 135 examples of Iberian Bibles. So just keep that in mind as a methodological point. Okay, here we are, choir 11. So it's the end of Devarim. It's the end of the Chamishe Chumshe Torah, the end of Chumash, the Pentateuch. Here, 119 verso, the very end of the text. And the next thing that happens is a framed page that just so happens, and I don't think it's just so happens, I think it very deliberately frames the menorah that appears with the other temple implements on the following page. And there are people, Shulamit Latterman, I see is here. She has written so much more cogently about the menorah and the way that pictures like this in a whole host of Iberian Bibles represent the idea that the Tanakh is a Miktashaya. So I don't need to spend any time on the menorah. I don't know any other examples where the artist has worked so hard to create this visual experience where the page primes you, it gets you ready, and turning the page, almost like turning a textile or a covering or a cover, reveals the full color glory of the temple implements within. Then there's another blank page, then this abstract decorative pattern on what we can generically call a carpet page, and then we turn another page and we find two more such abstract designs. And then if we turn, wait, one thing, no, I missed, and then there's going to be Yehoshua is coming thereafter. Okay, so I think that, even if you're just coming to the Kennicott Bible for the first time, if you have any familiarity with Iberian art, Hebrew manuscripts, or Islamic material, you'll recognize that these abstract pages right here remind us of the ornamental paste downs at the front and the back of the book. And I think it's not a big claim to see these ornamental pages, these abstract pages, as a way to mark the end of the Chumash, the Torah portion, the Pentateuch portion of the whole Tanakh, and to kind of wrap it, to open and close it as a distinct unit within the entire Tanakh. And we'll see more examples of this kind of abstraction as we work our way through the book. But before we do that, a couple of more items of interest here in these choirs. Right, so here is the reverse of the last decorative page, which would have been on 123 recto. Then we get a blank. We get another blank. And then comes the beginning of Yehoshua. So I should have ordered these a little better. Again, here is another example of where I think Moshe ibn Zabara is being very conscious about the structure of his book, because in theory, he could have started Yehoshua right here on 124 recto. I understand why he wouldn't want to do it on 123 verso, right? There's all of this bleed through from the decoration on the recto, and it's just not going to look so nice. Right? It's going to be hard to read. So, okay, so why not start right there on 124 recto? And the answer, I think, is because this is exactly how the whole Tanakh began, with Bereshit, with an empty verso, sort of a clean start, maybe ex nihilo, right? And then when you turn to the verso, that's where you begin the book. So I think that Moshe ibn Zabara is manipulating or making a choice in order to have the beginning of Yehoshua, the beginning of Nevi'im, be structurally similar to the beginning of Bereshit. Okay, one other point before we finally leave choir 11. And that is something that I found quite exceptional, quite startling when I first noticed it, that here in the transition from choir 11 to choir 12, there was no catch letter, right? Here, there should be a yud, because it's the 10th choir in Moshe's count, right? And I've blown it up. I know you see a little smudge there, but I assure you that's not a yud. It's not a yud. So what's going on? Why didn't he put a yud here? Now, I've come up with three possible answers. I don't know if any of them is the one answer, if it's a combination of some of the others. Is it a davar acher? how do you understand it? I think one reason is most simply and even aesthetically is that Moshe didn't want a dangling letter on an otherwise blank page. It just wouldn't look nice. Perhaps more practically, Moshe understood that because of the whole disposition of decorative pages and blank pages at the beginning of Yoshua, that the binder would recognize that this was the end of the Torah, and this is the beginning of Nevi'im, and he didn't need the extra help of the catchword. Or, and this, I think it is the idea with the most potential and something that I need to think more about, and this is what I was hoping Dahlia Ruth would be able to help out with here, is that I think perhaps there's something special about the Yud, right? Because as we know, Yud is the common abbreviation for the name of Hashem. We don't even say Yud, it's that special. And so perhaps Moshe thought it was somehow inappropriate to use this even half indication of God's name in this very prosaic manner. Now, I haven't checked all 135 of my examples yet. I've spot checked half a dozen, and Kennicott is not unique in this. I've found other examples where the Yud and only the Yud is missing. I've got lists here if anybody wants to question me, but there are also manuscripts that do have the Yud. So it's not a universal rule, but there seems to be something there. Unfortunately, the direct model of the Cerbera Bible doesn't use letters at all. It uses full catchwords. So it's not helpful in this regard. Okay, let's, all right, so we've finally gotten to Nevi'im. You're saying, oh my God, right? It's a whole Tanakh. We only just got to Nevi'im. There are only 18 minutes left. He's never going to get through the whole book. I assure you, I will get through the whole Tanakh. We're jumping ahead to choirs 18 and 19, which are the next pair that have too many folios. And I will do you a favor. I will not get into all the particularities of why this is, but the short answer is that basically, if you go over here to your list of contents, you'll see that what happens right in this area is that the Nevi'im Rishonim end and the Nevi'im Acharonim begin. And they want to try and finish the Nevi'im Rishonim within a codicological unit. So they have to add two folios to each of choirs 18 and 19. Just trust me that that's what happened. All right, so let's get to Nevi'im Acharonim. Again, here's another example of how I think Moshe is considering very carefully the layout of his book. Exceptionally, Malachim ends. There's no extra decoration here. We'll see the typical kind of decoration that comes at the end of different Sfarim. Then again, there's another one of these full page blanks. Again, there's no reason why Yeshayahu couldn't have started here on 220 verso, but I think they're trying to keep all of the major units of the Tanakh parallel to one another. This is what the end of all the other books look like. They had various strap work, knot work, interlace patterns, all kinds of abstract patterns. I won't run through them. The fanciest one comes, not surprisingly, to mark another major division within the Tanakh between Nevi'im and Ketuvim, between prophets and writings. Exceptionally, Tehillim is also marked with a full page, right? To tell you that something special is happening here, even though it's not technically a major division of the Tanakh, but Tehillim Psalms are special. I just want to make one or two points about Tehillim before driving toward the conclusion. Unfortunately, I need to disprove another beloved theory about the Kennicott Bible. This one first proposed by Cecil Roth back in 1952, and then repeated in the Kennicott Bible facsimile commentary by Narkis and Cohen Mushlin. First, they quote Roth, and then later in the book, they just say that it's the case. What's the case? That on folio 37 recto, right, at the beginning of Psalm 90, Tefillah Lamoshe Isho Elokim, that Yosef Ibn Chaim, the artist, made a really nice decoration in order to highlight Moshe, right, and to complement the scribe, Moshe ibn Zabara, right? And what's the support for this? That back over on folio 23 recto, we have we have text about Yosef, and here we do have a case of a really fancy, both scribally and artistically, Masorah Magna that highlights Yosef, right? So the theory is Moshe ibn Zabara takes the opportunity here in the beginning of the book to complement the artist, Yosef ibn Chaim. So later on, Yosef returns the favor and highlights Tefillah L'Moshe, Isho Elokim. It's lovely. But as Narkis and Cohen Mushlin themselves recognized, it's not the only such decoration that spans the entire width of the page, right? And that these happen also on folio 360 recto and 366 recto. And so when Linda Safran and I were looking at the book and thinking about the use of abstract decoration throughout the entire Tanakh, we realized that essentially such decoration marks not the beginning of texts, but the end of texts, right? And so the key here is not Psalm 90, but it's really Psalm 89 that we need to be looking at, as well as Psalms 41 and Psalm 72. And it's true, as Narkis and Cohen Mushlin recognize, these Psalms are three of the five major divisions of Sefer Tehillim, right? But only these three, not all five, are so marked. So what's the key? And it was Linda who realized that it's only 41, 72, and 89 here that end Amen v'Amen, as circled there. Right? They're the only three such Tehillim, and this is what motivated the extra decoration. Now, those of you who are more scholars of Tanakh than I will go deeper and tell me more about why Amen v'Amen is so important and I'll be pleased to hear that. But at least I think it throws away the idea that this somehow is about honoring Moshe ibn Zabara. Okay, let me, in the 10 minutes remaining, talk about the end of the book, right? So we began, so shall we end. Now, I've just taken the opportunity to argue against Narkis and Cohen Mushlin, but there are many things in their treatment of the book that I agree with, including the fact that the end of the Kennicott Bible is problematic. And so let's focus on those last two choirs in our last 9 minutes. So you'll remember that choir 1, containing the Sefer Michlol by Rabbi David Kimchi, the Radak, was not counted by Moshe ibn Zabara, nor was the end of Sefer Michlol. And I think that this is a very straightforward matter. Once you look at it, it's a way for Moshe to make a distinction between the sacred biblical text and the non-sacred biblical text. I suppose you would say, it's the Ikar and the Tofel, right? They're not the same. They're ontologically different. Okay. Now, I have to, I have to be honest. It's not a perfect system because you say, wait a second, Cohen, in your final choir 38, in your penultimate choir 38, there is actually a little bit of Sefer Nehemiah. And isn't that biblical text? Isn't that part of the Ikar? And I would have to say, yes, it is. So all I can say in my defense and in defense of Moshe ibn Zabara is that it wasn't perfect. They didn't have a perfect system. Okay. Now, I think that Cohen Mushlin and Narkis were also reasonably disturbed by the end of the previous choir, whatever number it was, at choir 38, because the Sefer Michlol ends, then you've got blank, blank, blank. Why do you have 3 blanks? Especially because you then get another choir, which I'm calling choir 39, which is 10 folios. And the only thing in it is the artist's colophon there. But all the rest of it is blank. And that's a big expense of vellum. And it's just puzzling why there should be so many blank pages. Narkis and Cohen Mushlin suggested that maybe there were going to be additional texts or there were going to be more illustration and that it was left unfinished. I find it hard to think that they would have left the book unfinished. I do suspect that what this means, because it's not counted, right? Because it doesn't have anything else, I have a feeling, right? And I mean, the big problem is that why didn't Yosef ibn Chaim put his colophon here somewhere, right at the end of the book? So my own suspicion is that Moshe ibn Zabara finished it. He imagined that this folio 445 would have been the very final paste down to connect to the book box. But then at the end, Yosef ibn Chaim came in and said, I'm going to insert this extra choir with my name in it. But I have to admit, I haven't fully worked it out yet, and I just don't know, and maybe somebody listening has a clever idea. Okay, let me conclude. Now, I've been chatting on for almost an hour now, so I won't be surprised if you've forgotten that what originally attracted me to the Kennicott Bible was this page, the iconography of the inverted battle before the castle. And what is the connection of this imagery to the text of the Sefer Michlol, which historically scholars have said there's no connection, but I just, in my heart of hearts, I know there has to be a connection. I just haven't figured it out. But I think what is fair to say now, what I am confident is saying, is that clearly there is a deliberate attempt on the part of Moshe ibn Zbara and Chaim ibn Yosef to Yosef ibn Chaim to create a Tanakh that was wrapped in the grammatical treatise. And so again, I wanted to see how common is this. And so I looked at my 135 Iberian Bibles, and you should be so grateful that I only have 3 minutes left, because you won't have to hear about all 135 examples. So I'll just say, Bikitzor, 82 of them out of 135 have some kind of prefatory non-biblical material. Mostly it's Masorah of one kind or another. And often that Masoretic material is done in one of these two visually creative ways. There are a handful of there are 9 Bibles that don't use Masorah, but rather other things. There's a Bible in Oxford that has Rashi on top and bottom. There's a Tanakh in Cambridge and in Cincinnati that has Moreh Nevuchim instead of the Masorah Magna on top and bottom. Incredible. And there are some of these texts, like the one on the screen, you can go visit it in Yerushalayim, that has grammatical text of the Radak, Sefer HaShorashim, at the top. And because they ran out of room, they put the rest of the Sefer at the end of the book. So, and the Serebra Bible itself is also one of only 3 manuscripts that takes the Radak's grammatical text and puts it at the beginning and or end of the book. So if you take the big picture, sorry, let me just squeeze this in the last 90 seconds. 135 Iberian Bibles. It is certainly common to have non-biblical material, usually at the beginning, often at the end. And that is usually Masoretic material. A small subset have grammatical material from Radak. Only 3 of them do it at the beginning of the end rather than within the body of the manuscript. One of them is the Serebra Bible, which is the model of Kennicott. But when it comes time to making the Kennicott Bible, they did not copy the Serebra Bible. They did not use the text of Sefer HaNikud, otherwise known as the Et Sofer, but rather the Sefer Michlol. Right, so even the copy is not a copy. So here's my final paragraph. I'm not a historian of texts and certainly not of grammar, but let me offer my own preliminary thoughts. Sefer HaShorashim was essentially a dictionary. Right? Sefer HaShorashim was essentially a dictionary. And in that sense, it was logical replacement for the very short Masorah that usually accompanied Iberian Bibles. The Sefer Michlol, on the other hand, is, in the words of Frank Talmadge, a summa of all Hebrew grammar. So in designing the Kennicott Bible, Moshe ibn Zbara and Yosef ibn Chaim were guided by the Cerebral Bible and certainly appreciated the traditional structural principle of wrapping the biblical text. But unlike the Cerebral Bible and other such books, Moshe in the Kennicott Bible retained the traditional Masorah Magna and the Masorah Parva, but they wrapped it in the most complete grammatical work, the Sefer Michlol, which by the 15th century had become independently a kind of canonical grammatical work. And by doing so, they made it part of the overall conception of the Kennicott Bible, whose material splendor also made it a kind of summa of Iberian Hebrew Bibles, a perfect expression of God's sacred text with the apparatus necessary to comprehend it fully. Thank you very much for your patience and listening to me talk. As you can tell, I can talk about choir structures all day, and it doesn't even occur to me that other people might not be as equally fascinated. Okay, but I'm happy to take comments and answer questions and engage in conversation. I'm hoping that I've sparked some ideas either from people who know the material very well or people who are seeing it for the first time, because you're often the ones who have the fresh eyes and see things that those of us are blinded to because we're so close to the material.
Thank you, Adam. This was absolutely fascinating, and it really was an icebreaker. That's exactly what we were thinking, that people will bring free ideas, latest discoveries, and challenge the things that are already written or said. And I think your paper just proves that. And I see here, unfortunately, Eva Flemovich had to leave, but she would be in touch with email. You can see her chat as well. And I'm opening discussion. So any questions, comments, please be free to ask Adam or to express your own approach, ideas.
Maybe one of the little ones. They usually have the best observations. They're still thinking. Fair enough. Fair enough.
Okay.
Also, to be honest, if nobody has questions or comments, I will not at all be.
Wait. Let's be a little patient. People have to gather the thoughts. I saw here Shulamit was with us. I don't know if she is here, or Shalom Tzvi. Anybody?
Adam, hi, thank you. Oh my gosh, that was like a masterclass in research and pedagogy. So thank you so much. I was wondering if you could say a few sentences on what all of this micro history tells people that are not in the field about medieval manuscripts, that I don't know, a few sentences of and this means that the way we think about manuscripts, Hebrew manuscripts, right? Like that sort of thing. So I could kind of hold on to it.
You want me to pull out from the catchwords and give more of the big picture? I think it's a fair request. And there's so much.
Let me put it this way. do we now know more about this one Bible, or is there anything that we now know about more generally about this
So
type of work?
let me try and offer some broader methodological lessons that won't come as a surprise, I think, because I think there's nothing earth-shattering. I mean, I'm grateful that Miriam picked up on the essential point, which is that, you know, one of the things you do is you start with previous scholarship, you look for things that are interesting or idiosyncratic, and then you press them and you let the chips fall where they may, in the spirit of scientific inquiry. So I think the Kennicott Bible, or this particular work on my particular work on the Kennicott Bible right now, reaffirms the basic principle that every object has its own story, and that you have to attend to the particulars before you want to say bigger things. Now, you're quite right. I was very focused, but among the bigger things that I would say is that having focused on one particular aspect, why is the Sefer Michlol at the beginning and the end of the book? It allows me to think about all of the Iberian Bibles in terms of their structure. What are the patterns? Now, this isn't a big data project, right? The data set is not that big, but why is grammar, what's the relationship of grammar to the study of the Bible? Were these grammatical texts even used in a practical way, or were they more part of the trim, the apparatus, the addition that you put to onto the car to make it a luxury car, but truth is you don't even really need it, right? And I think that, as I said in the beginning, I wasn't just, you know, trying to be nice to people like Ava, right? All of us are working on the Perpignan Bible, the Cerbera Bible. You know, we're all trying to chip away at our particular things. And once we've done a better job of that, then we'll have the opportunity to make more intelligent statements about the phenomenon of the Iberian Bible as a whole. I mean, even just coming up with a list of 135, I had no idea there were so many Iberian Bibles from the Middle Ages, and historians might well pick. Look, we all come. I know I'm like all over the place here. We all come at these things from our own perspectives. You know, we're art historians. We like the aesthetics. We like the visual aspects, right? But there are people who are interested in intellectual history, right? The role of the Bible among Iberian among Iberian Jews in the Middle Ages, right? And they never look at the pictures, right? So this is just one more way of pushing the whole conversation forward and saying, you know, as an art historian, I need to think more about the role of grammar. You intellectual historians need to think more about all of the effort and all of the thought that went into decorating these things, because it's not just pretty pictures. But I'm preaching to the converted.
Thank you so much. No, that's fantastic. Thank you so much.
Anyone else?
Yes, Miriam, I would say.
Hi, Shalom.
Hi, Adam.
Shalom, shalom.
Shalom, shalom. So firstly, I want to thank you for this lecture. I mean, what you did, I certainly cannot do. I don't have the ability to do such a kind of analysis, but I want to go back to the question of Maya, of the big picture. I mean, for me, I mean, you have so many Bibles, that's true. But how many you have from the 15th century? How many you have just years before the expulsion? I mean, for me, the Kennicott Bible is most amazing that was created when it was created, when the Inquisition is around, when the life of Spanish Jews is so difficult, and to create such a marvelous Bible, like for so long, nothing like that was created as far as we know, and to have such a masterpiece in this period that is such, not easy to be a Jew in Spain at the time. I mean, for me, that's the most amazing thing about the Kennicott Bible. And also that the style goes back to something that is so, let's say, antique by this time. It's amazing. I mean, all these questions, I mean, so I cannot see all the Bibles as one unit because there is difference in time that from the early ones that, are so Islamic, let's say, to those that have more Christian influence and so on. And one comment about the grammar, I mean, Hebrew grammar is very important in medieval Spain. It's not something secondary. I mean, they are all interested in the Hebrew language and its construction and the verb and the verbs and so on. I mean, we know that all the poets, all the writers, all the commentators like Ibn Ezra are very much after the grammar. I mean, that's from them the main, let's say, way to understand the Hebrew Bible is through the roots of words and so on. So grammar is very central. Anyway, so nice speech.
But if you walk into your other room, right, and you pull a Tanakh off the shelf, it doesn't have in it. It might have Rashi, it might have Ramban. It doesn't have the Sefer Michlol in it, right? So you're right. I think it's just even more remarkable that they package it together, right? And it proves your point that it's so central, it's so important to the whole process of understanding Tanakh that it deserves to be put together in the same binding. I quite take your point about, look, I think it's heartbreaking. I can't think about the Kennicott Bible being made in northern Spain in 1476. We all know what's about to happen, right? And do they know what's about to happen? I'm not sure, but it is remarkable. And Shalom, I would go even further. If you know this as well as I do, that after 1492, when they get kicked out of Spain, right, a lot of them go to Portugal. And in the last decade of the 15th century and the first decade of the 16th century, we have about 10 luxurious Tanakh manuscripts made by that expatriate community in Portugal, right? These people just been kicked out. They must have an even more tenuous existence. And yet they're making these incredible Bibles.
They continue the tradition of Lisbon. I mean, this tradition started before the exiles from Spain came to Portugal. So they continue in the same tradition. And life in Portugal was much better than in Spain in this period. I mean, before 1492 at least. I mean, in the 1480s, 1470s, Jewish life in Portugal was maybe the best in Europe. I mean, as far as how they were treated by the king and so on.
I have to believe that 1492 also had an effect on that community. Mm. I mean, they couldn't have just gone on like nothing had happened. I don't know. Okay,
if you want to go into the historical question, I mean, those who went to Portugal were not Amcha, were the elite of Spanish Jewry that could pay a lot of money to be transferred to Portugal, to pay a lot of taxes. Most of the poor people went to the Ottoman Empire to Morocco. So we're speaking about real elite that was transferred, quotation mark, to Portugal. They had to pay a lot of money for that, and even it was, anyway, so that's speaking from social point of view now.
Clearly, I should stop at 1476. So what I will say, just going back to picking up something from Maya, the other thing that I want to also explore is this idea of preliminary materials and post-textual materials, the whole idea of wrapping a book, right? And thinking about it in terms of larger ways of thinking about books in the Middle Ages, not only among Jews, but also among Christians and Muslims, about how they treat non-biblical materials in their sacred books. So this is just a wedge into a question that goes beyond a particular group of users.
Okay, we have one question in chat. I will read it from Rivka Ben Sasson. Am I right that it was the same artist of both books that you represented? Was he 75 years old?
No, if I gave that impression, I apologize. I did not mean to suggest that at all. No.
Okay. All right. I have one more methodological question that I think would be good for our doctoral and postdoctoral students who are listening. How did you come to a decision to challenge what is known up to now about the Kennicott Bible? What brought you to that point? Maybe you mentioned it at the beginning, I missed it, but I think it would be good to repeat it.
Just curiosity. You know, I mean, this is how I was taught to be an art historian.
No, but was there really something specific that caught your eye that you said, okay, this is wrong, I have to go back and check it again?
No, it all started with the theory of Narkis and Cohen Mushlin, that there was a Christian owner who manipulated the Kennicott Bible. I thought, this is great. I would love for that to be the case, right? Because this is the kind of interreligious activity that we're also interested in. And I thought, if this is true, we need to talk about it more, right? Because when they wrote that in 1985, you know, it was a different intellectual and cultural context, right? And I thought, how come this hasn't been made more prominent in our new conversations about interreligious interactions, either positive or negative? And so methodologically, I start with something striking. And then when I have the rare privilege to look at a manuscript in person, I want to look at it forensically. And this is the kind of thing, if someone says there's an impress, or if someone says that there's a smudge, or if somebody says whatever the case may be, right? Digital images don't always tell you everything, right? I had a case where I looked at a manuscript in the British Library from the 10th century, a Christian 11th century Psalter. And just because of the way I looked and the light, and because I was looking for things, I found inscriptions that no one had ever seen before. And then we sent the manuscript to the lab, and they did infrared reflectography, oscopy-ish, and they pulled out very nice pictures of what I saw with the naked eye, because I was open, I was sensitive, I was troubled. I thought there's something not quite right on this part of the page, but then I looked at the other part of the page. And so I think that the methodological lesson is to just keep your eyes open, keep your mind open, trust, but verify, right? And if something doesn't work, then you push it forward. And I know that there are things that, it's very easy to say, oh, Narcisse was wrong. But I'm sure that in 5, 10, maybe in 5 minutes, right? Shalom Sabar said to me right now, Adam, you're wrong about the listening community. And you know what? Okay, I'm wrong. People are going to prove me wrong too. It's not, I don't take it personally, right? None of us knows everything. None of us sees everything, but we do the best we can with an open mind and open eyes. And when something just either doesn't seem right or it seems too good to be true, that's when you want to check it out and see for yourself. And you never know what will come as a consequence. So that was a long answer to a short question.
No, that's a great answer, and I appreciate very much. Thank you. Really tackles the research, how it is done, should be done. Thank you.
There you go. Okay, are we all going to go out and have a drink now? You owe me. You owe me a drink.
Okay. When you come to Jerusalem, we'll take you out.
לשנה הבאה בירושלים,
And
Amen.
any more questions, comments?
Yes, if I may. Thank you so much for fascinating lesson in archaeology of the book. I thought that the book that was not created once and forever is in this sense very similar to buildings or to objects that were created and altered and adapted all the time, all the process. And this focus on the object says us about the people for whom the reading of the book was the process, and not only the reading. It was the entire process of thinking, examining the images, and so on, and education. I also thought about the grammar as a part of liberal arts. So it's the basics of any academic or pre-academic studies in the medieval ages. So it's very logical, this accent on the grammar when we take the biblical text not only as a sacred text, of course, but also as an object of continuous studying. Now I also think about and very curious about the entirely decorative pages that, as you explain, frame or create stops or stations in the process of reading. But also, if we look at these pages, that they have their own optical value. It's something even inviting meditation, catching the eye. So it's a kind of para-reading, as if reading activities that are not informative, but anyway sensitive. For it's very interesting to think about these abstract, almost abstract images, and the way of interaction of the reader with this very sensitive experience. So thank you so much for so impressive approach to the book.
Ilya, thank you. Those are all, very cogent points, and I know that you're probably tired of hearing me talk about the Kennicott Bible. But as Ilya points out, there's still so much to be said. And we could spend hours, days, months, years trying to unpack it. And this is a small contribution, but the work goes on. And then we hand it over to Maya and she makes sense out of all of it.
Okay, if there are no any more questions, I think we can wrap it up here.
I have left my email is there. If anybody wants to contact me about this or anything else, I always invite and solicit your communication.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't see your email in chat. Did you
it's on the screen.
Oh, you saw on the screen.
It's on the
Okay.
screen.
Oh, it's on the screen. Okay. Sorry. Yeah, now I saw it. Okay, so thank you very much, Adam. It was really a wonderful evening here, morning with you. And send us recording. Okay, you can send us, if it's a bit large, send us with WeTransfer or any Jumbo or whatever, and we will save it. And I think Eva Formovich wanted to hear it, and then she'll write it to you. So if it's okay, I'll send it to her further.
Okay.
And Dalia too. I spoke with her, Dalia Ruth Halperin.
Okay.
We'll be happy to hear this and we'll connect with you later.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Fantastic.
Thank you very much, Adam.
תודה רבה.
Thank you for all.
תודה ללינדה.
Basis.
Okay, bye. Until next week. I hope we'll see each other next week again. Okay,
Okay.
bye for now.
Bye-bye.
ביי.
Bye-bye.